At the top of the show, we talked about how a global food crisis is being made worse by dwindling resources and rapid climate change. Well, now we're going to talk about a solution. Honestly, it's a small solution, but it's a start. Democratic Congressman Jim McDermott introduced legislation last week to place a tax on carbon emissions, basically all those greenhouse gases that are being pumped into our skies by the energy industry. Congressman McDermott's, quote, Managed Carbon Price Act of 2012 would require major producers of greenhouse gases like the coal, oil, and natural gas industries to purchase carbon credits from the Treasury Department, depending on how much pollution they want to spew into the air. So for every ton of carbon pollution, they have to buy a credit to cover it. According to the Brookings Institute, carbon credits would run at a price of roughly $15 per ton of carbon. On average, the big five oil companies dump around 500,000 tons of carbon pollution into the air every single day. So that comes out to $7.5 million each day that the big five oil companies will have to pay to keep polluting as much as they currently are polluting. Now that might sound like a pretty hefty daily expense, but considering these guys make about $342 million a day in profits, it's really not that much money. It's basically pocket change. And the revenue generated from this carbon tax will then be put to paying down the deficit and giving energy subsidies to consumers to deal with slightly higher prices as the economy transitions from fossil fuels to renewables. According to polling, 75% of Americans support regulating carbon greenhouse gases as a pollutant, and 60% support a carbon tax similar to what Congressman McDermott has introduced. So isn't it about time for the government to step in and do something about climate change and pollution? Or should we just leave it to the free market and wait for the oil barons to begin making the transition on their own, while the rest of us choke and burn? Austin Peterson joins me now. He's a libertarian and director of production for FreedomWorks. Austin, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
So I'm assuming your position on this is we should just wait until the free market determines that it's more profitable to stop polluting.
Well, that's not correct. That's not necessarily my position on this, because
what's your position?
Libertarians believe in private property rights. Nobody has the right to pollute someone else's property or to harm someone else's air or to dump something into somebody's river and not pay the price of that.
So you would support a law banning all pollution, period?
Well, what I would support is a law that would allow people to seek damages or recompensations for any pollutants that might inhibit their private property. So, for example, if I had a farm and an industrial chemical plant poured something that hit my farm and it damaged my livestock, I would be able to sue for that, or I would be able to have a recompensation for that. But the problem with this bill is what it does is it just goes and it taxes an industry, and then it takes that tax and puts it into what they call a trust fund. Well, when's the last time the government ever put something in a trust fund and didn't spend it, right? So they said they were going to put Social Security into a trust fund, but didn't they spend it?
Social Security is actually doing just fine. All you have to do is raise the cap on the Social Security tax, and it's solvent for the next 75 years.
And you have to raise retirement ages across the United States as well in order to make it up. Well, we can argue that, but let's get back to climate change. You know, we need to talk about triage. You know, economic triage. What is the most important thing that we can do right now to solve the problem? Let's assume that
to solve the economic problem or the climate change?
Well, it is an economic problem.
I think it's both.
Well, it really is.
I think if you unleashed a green revolution and revamped the entire energy grid, you would create millions of new jobs that would also get our economy back.
Well, you can do that, but you're going to have to change the American culture. You're not going to do this through government. You'd have to have some sort of fascistic style government in order to have some sort of a top-down approach to create a green revolution. You're never going to do that. You can't change hearts and minds that way.
Well, we're not proposing that. Not we. I'm not speaking for the Congressman McDermott, but he's actually proposing a pretty reasonable solution to this, and that is, which is actually a pretty free market solution, I would think, and that is, you will give benefit to companies in the free market that aren't polluting as much, rather than companies that are polluting a lot who have to spend just a little extra money to get rid of that, to do that pollution.
Well,
so you're basically spurring.
Right, so you're picking winners and losers. So you're bailing out some industries, and then you're excoriating others. So who's to say?
I wouldn't say you're excoriating, but doesn't government kind of have that role? I mean, we give tax breaks to married couples.
Well, yeah, absolutely. It's totally wrong.
Married couples
it's absolutely wrong for them to do that. Why should gay couples who get married not have the same rights that straight couples who get married do?
They should. That's a
well, they should absolutely. But you're picking.
But we're talking about
loser.
Single people versus married people. I mean, the government does take steps to promote behavior that's better for the better for the society.
But you're just giving into the too big to fail mindset there, because the government would say, oh, well, Bank of America is too important to the economy. We need to bail them out, right? Well, this is basically what you're doing in the sense of climate change.
I don't agree with that. I don't agree with bailing out the banks. I'm not going to represent the Democratic Party that supported the bailout.
But it's a picking winners over losers mentality that you're giving into.
We're not picking winners over losers. In 1888, Grover Cleveland, he was the only Democrat elected during the Robert Barron.
Great president.
Great president. Okay, so then you'll agree with this when he said corporations should, quote, be the carefully restrained creatures of law and the servants of the people.
Well, I mean, that depends. I mean,
isn't placing a carbon tax on corporations like oil
corporations
companies?
are not a democracy, you know, and you cannot legislate corporations necessarily without having some sort of unintended consequences. The point is that what is it you really want to do?
Slight cut in profits?
You want to stop climate change, right? If you believe that climate change is the issue, then you have to ask yourself, what is it that is going to stop climate change? And some law by an American congressman is not going to stop climate change. Remember, it's called global warming. It's not American warming, Sam.
It's not just about climate change. It's also about the millions of new asthma cases everybody gets. It's about the billions of dollars, if not trillions of dollars, in our war machine to protect our oil interests abroad. Climate change, for some insane reason, is still under debate in America, so we're not even going to have that debate.
Here's the problem.
We're talking about the externalities and the people that are suffering.
But the problem is that when you get climate scientists together and you ask them all, like there was 4 Nobel laureates and several global climate scientists and world leaders were brought together in Copenhagen, and they reached what they call the Copenhagen Consensus. And what they did was they ranked reduction of CO2 emissions as 16th out of 17 challenges of the most important things that the world faces today that we could combat. The top 4 were controlling HIV, micronutrients for fighting malnutrition, free trade to attenuate poverty, and battling malaria. So if climate scientists say that this is not even the most important thing that we could fight right now, why should we get behind this lanky Democratic congressman who doesn't even know how we could solve a problem when the real problems are coming from countries like India and China and other third world?
Well, as I just said, climate change is not the main reason why I would support something to regulate pollution, even though I think it's one of the biggest crises facing us. But like I said, for some reason that's still under debate. I'm talking about the millions of asthma cases, whatever. We'll get to that.
Okay.
I want to talk about something on the libertarian platform here.
Okay.
Section 2.6, it says monopolies and corporations. And this is the libertarian platform. It says, we defend the right of individuals to form corporations, cooperatives, and other types of companies based on voluntary association. We seek to divest government of all functions that can be provided by non-governmental organizations or private individuals. We oppose government subsidies to business, labor, any other special interest, yada, yada. Doesn't mention anything about how they're going to break up monopolies.
Well, what is the biggest monopoly that we have right now? Government is the monopoly. Government is a monopoly on force. So if you want to break up
we have a democratic government. Sure, it's gotten a bad rap now, and it's been corrupted by corporate influences.
Republic.
But the answer is not to get rid of government. The answer is to root out corruption within the government.
Well, you want to get rid of monopoly. So why do you want to have a monopoly on force? Well, if there's only one way to solve our problems, then democracy is the only way to do it. And we don't really have a democracy, by the way. We have a constitutional republic. Exactly, because democracy is a tyranny of the majority. And in the 1970s, people thought we were going to have global cooling, right? We were all going to die from global cooling.
And you would like tyranny of the oligarchy and like corporations?
Well, no, I would actually like tyranny of the individual, where I'm the master of my own house and my own private property.
You find it suspicious that all the billionaires are funding your movement?
No, but I hope they continue to do so because we're not doing so good so far.
All right, Austin.
Thanks, Sam.
a lot. Austin Peterson.